All right. Hello, hello. Karen, thank you so much for joining us. I'm so excited to have you on for this mindset series. This is our second one of the year, and we're going to be getting into it. I am not as familiar with some of your practices, and I know that as we work through hardship or trauma, or maybe things that we haven't even quite processed yet or recognize as trauma, getting into the
Mm,
right mindset for that is something where I think a lot of us don't know where to start. So
yep.
I would love to hear from you, maybe a little bit more about your practice, and then we'll get
Mhm.
into it.
Yep. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm looking forward to having this conversation as well. And yeah, I mean, I think firstly, the first thing to say really is that it's important to have these conversations to normalize talking about trauma because being human, it's really hard to escape living life without having experienced any kind of trauma. So I myself, I wouldn't say I've had any big traumas in my life. I feel lucky so far that I haven't experienced anything big that, I feel I'm fortunate in that sense. However, I have experienced little moments of traumas throughout my childhood and teenage years
Mm,
that absolutely impacted me going forward, becoming a woman in my 20s that had low self-worth, zero self-belief because of those traumas. So that's why I feel it's really important to talk about these, normalize them, and also, sort of there's a misconception that trauma is big events in life, and it's really not.
mhm. Thank you for sharing. I think that a lot of people who get into this space of serving have kind of that point in their life where they can relate to, and so I think that that is such
Mm,
a humbling career path to take because I think
mhm.
support always needs support, and when you're supporting so many
Yeah.
people, I'm just constantly in awe of therapists and those who serve in the mental wellness space, so thank you so much for
Mm,
all that you do.
yeah.
You mentioned the hypnosis piece a little bit, and so do you
Mm.
mind maybe sharing more about what that looks like and how that's a piece of your practice?
Yep. So I first of all trained in NLP, which is Neuro-Linguistic Programming. I went on to sort of do the advanced level of NLP, which included hypnotherapy because both of them work with our subconscious mind. So hypnosis is just going deeper. When I'm working with a client doing NLP coaching, which is mindset coaching essentially, we're having conversations, we're digging deep, but they're not in a trance like state. So with hypnosis, you're
Mm.
getting deeper into the subconscious, basically bypassing the ego and the conscious mind to access all the good stuff, everything that's in our subconscious. So that's what
Before
hypnosis, yeah.
Very cool. So before you get into that subconscious, how can folks prepare their mind and their mindset to
Hmm.
be in that right state to start talking about things that are harder?
So I mean, there's no right or wrong way. I think actually people should sort of go within here and feel what works for them. So there's lots of ways to start. I think journaling is great just for even if you don't know what to write, just start writing. Even if you say Karen Lee's making me write and I don't know what to write, just write whatever's coming in your mind. And then all the good stuff will start to come out and just get it. I would even call it the junk. Get all the junk out and then all the good stuff will start coming out. And then that will start you on that journey. But not everyone likes writing or journaling, and that's okay. So maybe meditation or maybe just finding what works for you. So there's no right or wrong way. It really is just finding, but it's getting it out, talking to someone or talking into your phone just so that you've sometimes
Mhm,
just getting the words out, saying it out loud, even if it's not to anyone else. Yeah, but definitely acknowledging it really is what you're doing when you're journaling or speaking or meditating. You're acknowledging the traumas.
mhm. Yeah, I think that's a key piece there is that you're acknowledging it. Because I know when I go to brain dump or even trying to journal, I feel like I get very stuck because I'm like, I don't know
Mm.
what exactly am I supposed to say here? Are there any prompts that you give your clients or share with folks as they're starting to open that door of conversation that will help them kind of start getting all of that junk, as you said,
Mm.
getting all of that out?
You can ask yourself questions like, "How am I feeling now?" And
Mm,
then getting that, and then, okay, why am I feeling that? And then getting that out. And it's almost like you're going back, you're digging deep, you're unearthing the layers. So starting from now and then starting to go back to, okay, well, where did that come from? Why am I feeling
Mhm.
this? And it's okay if you don't know the answers. They might come later, maybe they won't, and that's okay too. But again, it's acknowledging how you're feeling now and that that came from somewhere.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense, and I think that makes it feel more approachable when it doesn't have to be starting from the beginning. You can start where you were now
Mm.
and kind of work your
Mhm.
way back because what's easier than knowing what's going on than right now?
Yep. Yep.
That's
And
that's
everything in our past has led to how we're feeling now, so yeah, it's a good way to start.
yeah, that's excellent. So, as you work with hypnosis, how have you seen that tool or that approach help folks get into that space of talking or unearthing different things that maybe they've blocked from their memory?
Mhm. So, hypnotherapy is some people prefer hypnotherapy to talking therapies or coaching because they can relax. You know, it's you're making yourself very vulnerable when you're sharing, especially to a stranger or someone, you know, that you don't know very well. You're making yourself very vulnerable. It can feel awkward. It can, if you're already feeling anxious, it can bring up even more anxiety. A lot of people turn to hypnotherapy, one because it's pretty known, it's quite conventional, you know, it's not the unknown. People know what hypnotherapy is, they see it on TV.
Mhm.
Um, but also they don't have to talk, they can relax. I'm doing all the work for them. It's my voice that's sending them into hypnosis. I think it's important to say as well, all hypnosis is self-hypnosis. So I can't hypnotize someone. My voice can, and the words I say can lead them into hypnosis, but they're doing it
Mm.
themselves. So they are in complete control. But yeah, so they don't have to necessarily do anything. They're not talking to me, they're not answering me. I've already established what their desired outcome is, and let's get to the root. What's the block? What is it that's holding them back? And they might not know, but their subconscious knows. Their subconscious has been soaking everything up that's happened to them throughout their life.
Mm. I don't think I realized that distinction between the control piece of it or who's leading it.
Mm,
Can we
mhm.
go into that a little bit more? I'd love
Yeah,
to
of course.
explore what that looks like because I think
Mhm,
too being open to hypnosis is a really big piece of it because I know
mhm,
I use a lot of those sleep meditations and the sleep hypnosis tools that I
mm,
have, and I know if I'm not in the mindset of being a participant in that, then I don't go to sleep,
mm,
and I've never thought of that as it being on me to kind of follow that lead. So what is that like?
mhm. So a hypnotherapist really should be finding out as much as they can before. So there's always a pre-conversation so that I can find out what their desired outcome is and you know what they're currently feeling or experiencing. I'll ask them if they feel they've got any blocks or emotional blocks, mindset blocks, and I'll take all of that into consideration and their hypnotherapy session will be tailored around that. I won't say anything out with that
Mhm,
because the thing with hypnotherapy and what when I was saying about you're in complete control, just to give an example, you know when you see people on the stage and it's comedy, the hypnotherapy or the hypnosis person will be you know saying you know doing silly things and it's like they're making a fool of themselves. Actually, they're not doing anything that they wouldn't normally do or that they wouldn't want to do. It's just that you're
mhm,
taking away the ego. So you're, you know, bypassing the ego and they're just oblivious to you know anyone laughing at them or they're just you know they're doing something it's not going against their values. And
mhm,
that's the thing with hypnotherapy, you're in complete control, and if I was to say anything during the hypnotherapy that went against your values that you would start to come round, like you sometimes see them on stage and they snap out of it and they're looking around and they're confused. It's because the hypnotherapist has said something that maybe they don't want to do or that goes against their values, so they've suddenly come round.
okay, interesting, I had no idea.
Mm,
That is very cool. So, when somebody is working to be in that receptive mind, you mentioned meditation and journaling and then this
mhm,
conversation. I think sometimes working through trauma or different experiences, we often want to do that with people. Do you have advice on how folks can get into that mindset to start working through some of these things in person together?
So working with another person on their traumas, you mean?
Yes, and I think sometimes even in conversation. So,
Mm,
say like a husband wife, like if they had
mhm,
gone through something, a loss of a
mhm.
child or something like that is an
Yeah,
incredibly traumatic experience.
mhm,
What are ways that the two of them can be working to put themselves in the right mindset to support one another and start working through that
mhm.
together?
Honestly, I think talking about it is more therapeutic than people realize. It's almost like you're taking the burden off yourself and you're sharing that with someone. You're not putting the burden on them, you're sharing it with them. And, it's when we're bottling up, because I mean, we kind of want to. I think as humans, we naturally want to share, but it might be that we feel you don't want to hurt them or trigger them or be a burden on them or make yourself vulnerable because this society that we find ourselves in, it's
Mhm,
almost like we're shamed. I feel for making ourselves vulnerable and yeah, there's things that have been given that taboo label, and I think trauma is
yeah,
one of them.
mhm. Yeah, I don't disagree, and I think at the beginning too, you said the more we can talk about trauma and
Mm,
normalize the conversations around it, the more people will be able to work through it and I think
mhm,
share some of that and heal from it.
mhm,
How have you seen your practice help people work through it? Because you mentioned that they're not necessarily saying things out loud, so how have you seen that translate in your practice?
mhm. So I'm obviously there's things like self-worth that we want to tap into. Trauma can then lead to, and this is I'm talking from personal experience, and those little traumas that all build up, and we can end up with low self-worth, low self-belief, and we forget that we even had it. We were born with our self-worth turned all the way up, and same with our self-belief. We weren't born with any thoughts, any negative thoughts, but these all came later transpiring from our traumas or from society. Um, we're not taught, oh, that's still in there. We can access that. So in hypnotherapy, often it comes down to a sense of low self-worth and just not seeing a way out. So we want to tap back into that. We want to tap back into the self-belief and switching negative thoughts to positive, more empowering thoughts.
Mhm. I think I mean, I agree with all of that. I think it's the mind is such a powerful tool that we have, and the more we
Mm,
understand it and how we can, I say, serve the mind by using these
mhm.
different tools and resources we have, the better we
Mhm,
all are for it. How do you mind if we go into a little bit of how you got into hypnotherapy?
mhm. Yeah. So my background was corporate. I studied business at university. I'd worked in sales for a long time throughout my 20s. I just assumed that would be the life I was going to go into, maybe marketing or something in the corporate world. And I loved working in corporate.
Mhm,
But once I graduated, which was around actually 2020, so I was a later in life, I was a single mum at university. I graduated when I was 35, so just a few years ago. But I mean, I think 2020 was that time when we all started to reevaluate our lives and what we
mhm,
were doing, and I just thought I don't want to work in corporate for the rest of my life. It's just not for me. And I had to think, well, I don't know what to do. I felt very lost. So I actually hired a coach, a mindset coach, for the first time ever. It was a very new concept for me.
mhm,
And just the healing, the growth, the breakthroughs that I had, and the tools that she gave me. I never knew anything about the subconscious mind, it was almost like she was teaching me to take my power back. And I thought, oh, I've got power. I didn't know that. I'd been giving my power away all this time. And yeah, I left working with her. I left feeling very empowered with it. My mind just expanded so much, and suddenly felt there was so many opportunities and possibilities out there for me. And I went down the rabbit hole of NLP and ended up doing the course in NLP to help other people as well.
That's amazing. I love how you were empowered and now you are working to empower
Mm,
others and those that you serve. That is amazing.
mm,
What was it
mhm,
like? I think you mentioned earlier a little bit about like that reprogramming piece. Having
mhm.
experienced those learned thoughts and behaviors, what was that like transitioning into who you are now and having to go through that reboot?
Mm, so my life is black and white from pre-2020 to now, and obviously different career, different lifestyle. So I talk to, on social media to friends, to family about, I'm a big encourager and supporter for anyone who has a little dream or a big dream. And it doesn't need to be anything tangible. It can be, just changing your inner self so that your outer world just feels lighter or better. I talk about living a life that gives you butterflies. It doesn't need to be anything big and grand. It can be just being content and fulfilled.
Mhm,
So I very much practice what I preach, and I've definitely taken lots of moves that 10 years ago I just would never have dreamed that I would have had the confidence or been brave enough to make. I've done so many things outside of my comfort zone. I've done public speaking. I've done, started my business. I sold my home and took my kids abroad to, just try living in another country, and then coming home and starting again, coming back to Scotland and starting again. And just like I say, practicing what I preach. I just think anything's possible. It's our perception of it that makes it scary. It's not really scary.
mhm. Yeah. How do you think there are ways that we can train our mind maybe on our own to start thinking like this is not scary? Like how can we start turning that switch as we get ready to maybe ask someone for help or maybe start therapy? What can that look
Mm.
like?
So, I mean, you can start by reframing it. So get curious about the thoughts in your mind. So I didn't know this back then. So when I was sort of healing and addressing my trauma, I didn't know what I knew now. But I would get curious about the thoughts. How are you feeling about your trauma? What's your self-talk like against, when it comes to your trauma? Getting
Mhm,
curious about it and then reframing it. And rather than thinking, oh, it's, my trauma has ruined my life. I'll never be the same. Try reframing that, for example, to my trauma has ruined my life up until now. I take my power back, or I will not let it ruin the rest of my life, or I'm going to change, or that I'll never be the same again. Rather than this, you can even just change the tone of that. I'll
mhm,
never be the same again. So reframing it is really important because keeping it the way it is, nothing's going to change. If it's still internal, your external reality is going to be the same.
mhm. I feel like I've been seeing that a lot, especially around this time of year, because it's what you believe and what you say out loud is such a
Mm,
big piece of
mhm.
what will be. Because if
Mhm.
that's what you think, then that is what will happen, and that's the path you're headed down. So I love how you said that, and I think the way that you frame it as getting curious about so many different pieces that
Mhm.
we've talked about today is so unique, and I love how positive and adventurous it sounds because it already sounds less scary
Mm.
when it's get curious, and I love
Yeah.
that, I appreciate that, thank you for sharing.
Mhm. It's okay.
So, what is the best way for our community to get in touch with you? We've loved having you on the podcast, and I'm
Mm.
excited to be digging deeper with you shortly. But for those listening, how can they follow and keep up with you?
Yep. So I am Karen Leigh on all platforms. The website I am Karen Leigh. You can find more information and more about my story on there. And yeah, always to work with me. And of course, Instagram, Facebook. I'm on all of them.
Perfect. And what's the website so people can check out the work that you are doing?
Yep. It's iamkarenleigh.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Karen, for joining.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.